Does a mixed hybrid of defense penetration crit work? Not really, and let me tell you why. There's a couple of ways to look at that, Mizzy. It's actually a very good question. It's an extremely good question, and it needs to be talked about, actually. So, a hybrid of defense penetration crit doesn't work for two reasons. Number one, the value that you get out of a little bit of crit damage is lowered massively in PvP. And the value that you get out of a little bit of defense penetration is lowered massively in PvP as well, okay? So what people will do is they will take a massive amount of one and a small amount of another, but not if you're talking about crit damage as a small amount. Here's why. Resilience is extremely powerful in PvP, okay? In PvP, resilience will lower, so my resilience will lower somebody else's crit damage and crit rate. But crit damage can only go down to a minimum of 50%. So my 66% crit damage against almost anybody in the game is just going to get lowered down to 50%, right? This melee crit damage that's here. What this means is that I'm always definitely going to crit 50% damage. And I use this as a defense penetration build to always do 50% more damage to somebody, and in addition to that, hopefully 50% more damage from penetrating through their defenses entirely, right? But if I went a mix of both, say I had 150% crit damage and 6,000 defense penetration, the value that I get out of both just almost goes down to zero, because yeah, maybe I have 150% melee crit damage, but if somebody has the regular 10k resilience, that's actually enough to take that all the way down back to 50. As if I had 66%, it's the same thing. 150% goes right down to 50% anyways. So again, all of that extra points you put into crit damage doesn't make sense, because it's just getting reduced in PvP down to zero, right? Defense penetration is very similar. So defense penetration, you can imagine like a graph, and the more defense you have, the less value you get out of it, okay? So it curves off massively. This means that you might be able to take down some... Here, can I like draw? Let me do something here. One second. I don't want to do it. Okay, whatever. So you can imagine a graph, right? So the more defense you have, the less value you get out of it. So again, say you can take somebody down to like 1,000 defense, okay? That's still going to give him 11% of actual defense mitigation, right? But if you take them down a completely, to zero, then it will give you 11% more damage on top of that, right? Essentially, compared to having somebody with 1,000 defense, right? If you can take it to zero, that's a massive boost. So a defense penetration build also wants to maximize their actual values to the absolute top amount, because the whole point of a defense penetration build is you're either taking that person down to zero defense, or you're really not getting much value out of your defense penetration. So here's what happens in reality. Say you're a crit build, okay? And you have everything in crit. You have 300% crits, maybe you're an archer, and it's crazy. You have all the crit damage in the world. But there are some items in this game that you just can't put crit on. You can only put defense penetration on. And a good example of that is the Soul Liberator, or the Hereafter Rebellion necklace. You can't put crit damage on this, but you can put defense penetration. So say you're an archer and you have crazy crit damage because you're a crit damage build, you're still going to put defense penetration on this because, well, it might only help you do like, 5% more damage, or not even that, maybe like 1% more damage, 2% more damage, but that's still better than nothing, right? You still get a little tiny bit, 1 or 2% more damage that you may as well take, right? You may as well have that. And so you do that to gear that you cannot get crit damage on. You'd rather get the defense penetration on. And again, the examples there are the accessories, really. Is the Soul Liberator is a good example of one that can just have defense penetration, and the Noriet Ring is another one that can just have defense penetration. The Flawless Ram's Chosen Ring is another one that can just have defense penetration, and so even just these alone help just a little bit for a crit damage build to be able to at least do 5-10% more damage from defense penetration, but really their focus is on critting, right? For both of these builds, crit rate is extremely important. Crit rate is so important for a defense penetration or a crit damage build, because even a defense penetration build is trying to crit, but they are guaranteeing that their crit damage works. They're essentially saying, hey, you know what? I'm going to fight somebody who has high resilience, and their resilience is not going to do as much against me, because even though they have high resilience, it only affects my crit rate, but my crit damage, totally useless for them. It's going to be 50 no matter what they have, right? And so there's merits to having crit rate for any kind of build. Yeah, I hope that answers the question, Mizzy, ex-Mizzy.